Hey young friends, Dr. Bill here. I am so glad that you could join me for today's lesson. In all of our discussions of late, we have been talking about big names in the Bible, some of the characters who loom very large in many of the stories that we find throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. And today we're continuing our discussion on King David. Today is the third lesson in which we've taken a look at his life. And so what we find in this story, and it's not a happy story, we're picking up where we left off last week. And you may recall that last week we talked about David's tremendous failure. Previous to that, David had shown himself to be a fabulous warrior, a great leader of people. But then David did not go to war one year, and he got ensnared in temptation, and as a result he took Bathsheba to be his wife, and he managed to kill her husband, a man named Uriah. So David did two very bad things. He violated two of the most important of the Ten Commandments. He stole another man's life, and he killed. Well, as we talked about last week, David, having been confronted by the prophet Nathan, David became very sorrowful, exceedingly sad for everything that he had done, and he confessed his sin to God. And God, being great and rich in mercy, forgave David for his failures. Nevertheless, this did not mean that having been forgiven by God, David's choices did not have consequences or results. And that's what we're going to look at today. So the book of 2 Samuel tells us how these choices that David made played themselves out, particularly within David's own family. Now, according to 2 Samuel, one of David's sons, a man named Absalom, was very jealous of David. And out of the affair between David and Bathsheba, the killing of Uriah, Absalom sensed that his father was weak, and this might be an opportunity where he could step in and push David out of being king, and he can make himself king. Absalom was very ambitious. Well, to accomplish this, Absalom did two things. Every day he went to the gate of the city, the gate of Jerusalem, and it's always in the gates of the city that important things are transacted or carried on. Important transactions happen in the gate of the city. It's sort of like when we go to the county courthouse to get a driver's license or a tag, or we have to pay taxes on our property, stuff like that. Well, the gate of the city was kind of the courthouse. And so people would gather there hoping that the king would show up and would rule on cases that they brought in front of the king. Well, Absalom began to take advantage of that and said, "Oh, David can't be here today, but I'm here, and why don't you let me take care of your trouble?" And so Absalom began to do the business of the king in the gate of the city. And as he did that, he began to grow more and more popular in the eyes of many of the people. They began to assume, well, David's not here, he must not care for us. But Absalom does. See how wonderful Absalom is. See how he takes care of us, how he treats us so well. That was the first thing Absalom did. He began to sow some discord amongst the people. Second thing is that he began to recruit and raise an army that would have soldiers who were loyal to him and to him alone. Absalom was trying to recruit an army so that when the day came, he could go out and defeat the forces, the army, loyal to David. Well, as 2 Samuel tells us, Absalom did exactly that. His army became very, very strong. And so Absalom and his army began to attack people in Israel, trying to get them to declare whether they would be loyal to him or loyal to King David. Well, when David heard about this, he recognized that he and his family were in real danger. So they fled the city of Jerusalem and moved out into the desert or the wilderness. And there, David began to muster an army himself. He began to recruit people who were loyal to him so that one day they could do battle with the army of Absalom. Well, eventually that day came, and when that battle took place, David's army was successful, and the forces of Absalom were put down. Now, Absalom fled the battlefield. While his soldiers were being captured and taken prisoner, Absalom said, "I need to get out of here. I need to escape because something bad will happen to me if they capture me." Now, 2 Samuel tells us that Absalom had very long and very thick hair. And so as he was riding away from the battlefield on a mule, the writer of 2 Samuel tells us that Absalom and the mule went under a very large oak tree. And some of the branches were very low. And as a result, Absalom's hair got tangled up in those branches, and so the mule kept going on, leaving Absalom hanging in the air by his hair. And so when one of David's commanders, a man named Joab, learned of this, he immediately went and killed Absalom and reported what he had done to King David. Now, as you might expect, David, though he was angry with Absalom for having fueled this revolt, David was very sorry. He was in deep grief because his own son had been killed. Now, as I said, this is not a happy story, not at all, but still it offers us some very important lessons. The first is this: as I mentioned at the outset, what we learn from David in this story is that our choices have consequences. The choices we make have results. Things happen because we chose this or we chose that. Just as David made a choice to destroy the family of Uriah and Bathsheba just for himself, well, so the time came that having made that choice, that David's family was about to be destroyed and broken up. David's choice had a consequence. And the second thing we learn about those choices is that they have a ripple effect. When we make choices, they don't just affect us, and neither do the consequences affect us only. Sometimes our choices ripple out in such a way that they affect other people and they do harm to other people. In this case, David, when he made his choice to try to steal Bathsheba away from Uriah, he had no idea that that choice would eventually result in the death of his son and also the weakening of his position as king in Israel. He had no idea that would happen. He made that choice, and suddenly all kinds of things way beyond David's immediate family began to happen. So our choices and their consequences are not always limited. They have effects and results far more than we can imagine at the time that we make the choice. So, again, this is not a happy story in King David's life, but it is an important story in the fact that it reminds us, as I said before, Our choices have consequences. What we choose matters. And our takeaway from this story about David is that I hope together, you and I, will focus on making the best kinds of choices we can make. Choices that are smart, choices that are wise, but most importantly, choices that do not hurt other people or ourselves. Well, that's it for today. And again, I'm so glad that you joined me. I hope you're having a great week, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And if not, seeing you in person soon, I'll be looking for you the next time we do one of these lessons. You take care, and God bless.